he asked his pregnant wife to befriend his mistress. Now they both left the millionaire bankrupt. Imagine stepping into a world of opulence and deception where crystal chandeliers illuminate secrets hidden behind gilded doors. In this tale, a millionaire husband dares to cross lines. Most wouldn't even dream of urging his very pregnant wife to become friends with the mistress he brazenly flaunts. But in a twisted turn of fate, the two women unite against him, pulling off an unexpected coup that leaves him penniless and alone. This isn't a fairy tale of happily ever after. It's a raw chronicle of betrayal, revenge, and unforeseen alliances, proving that sometimes karma arrives with a vengeance no one can escape. Daniel Morgan had always known he was destined for something big. Born to modest parents in a small Midwestern town, he showed an early aptitude for business and numbers. While other kids were out riding bikes or playing baseball until dusk, Daniel was at the library devouring books on stock markets, entrepreneurship, and the habits of billionaires. At only 15, he started reselling used electronics online, squirreling away every penny he made. By the time he graduated from high school, he already had a small fortune enough to pay for college out of pocket and invest in real estate on the side. It didn't take long for word of Daniel's financial acumen to spread throughout his community. Teachers lauded him as a prodigy. Local business owners sought his advice on next steps for growth. He wore his success like a mantle, quietly confident, never loud about his wealth, but never modest about his achievements either. He soon attended a prestigious college in the heart of New York, where the city skyline every evening whispered promises of fortunes yet to be made. In college, Daniel's natural knack for networking came to the forefront. He was never short on invitations to exclusive parties hosted by investment clubs or philanthropic dinners funded by major corporations. During one such event, he even shook hands with Sir Richard Branson, an encounter that only deepened his resolve to leave an indelible mark on the world of high finance. Networking became second nature to him. After all, he believed relationships were the currency of the future. Upon graduating, Daniel dove headfirst into the investment banking scene. By his late 20s, he was heading his own boutique firm, Morgan Capital Ventures. Not long after, the media began touting him as the next Warren Buffett, a moniker he neither rejected nor fully embraced. He simply kept forging forward, closing massive deals and expanding his empire into technology, startups, luxury real estate, and even philanthropy. Though the latter was often more for image than genuine goodwill, Daniel's personal life mirrored his corporate success, at least from the outside. He dated models, actresses, and even an heiress or two. Yet it was Eleanor Shaw, a graceful and intelligent art curator, who would eventually capture his heart. Or so everyone believed. Eleanor was soft-spoken, yet fiercely intelligent, capable of identifying forgeries in 18th-century paintings at a single glance. She was drawn to Daniel's ambition, and he found in her a quiet reassurance that balanced out his high-octane lifestyle. Their courtship was a whirlwind, candlelit dinners in the best Michelin-starred restaurants, surprise weekend getaways to private villas in the Caribbean, and sweet, intimate moments stealing away from society's relentless buzz. Within a year, they were engaged, and their wedding took place at a historic villa near Lake Como, Italy, complete with celebrities, CEOs, and social elites who flew in just to toast the happy couple. The tabloids couldn't get enough splashing their photos on covers with headlines about how they exemplified power and grace. But underneath the polished veneer, a quiet tension existed. Daniel had always been a driven, single-minded person. When he set his sights on something, be it a new acquisition or a new personal relationship, he pursued it relentlessly. That same fiery drive often made him impatient, quick-tempered, and at times insensitive to the emotional needs of those around him. Elena, on the other hand, was soft in her approach to life's challenges. She believed in steady, nurturing growth, whether it was building a supportive environment at home or fostering emerging artists at the museum where she worked. She wanted to be a calm harbor for Daniel, a place where he could set down the weight of his worldly ambitions. She believed in him in his brilliance, trusting that any rough edges would eventually smooth out under the gentle influence of love and family. When Elena discovered she was pregnant, the joy she felt was indescribable. She yearned to start a family, imagining a future where she and Daniel would raise their child with the same values of integrity and empathy that she cherished. She assumed Daniel too would. It started harmlessly enough, or so Daniel claimed when he later tried to justify his actions. He met Sasha Kulikova during a high-profile networking event at a 5-star hotel in Manhattan. Sasha was an enigmatic presence from Moscow, a woman who exuded confidence and allure. She had managed to turn a small family inheritance into a thriving import-export business specializing in luxury goods. In that rarefied air of multi-million-dollar deals, she mingled effortlessly, wearing a silver evening gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Eyes followed her everywhere she went. Hers was a quiet magnetism that left men enthralled and women cautious. Daniel had gone to that event, expecting to make connections in Eastern European markets. Meeting Sasha felt like destiny, or so he'd later say. Within the first conversation, they discovered a mutual fascination with fine art, as Sasha had once studied painting in her youth. She recognized Daniel's name from a business journal that had featured a profile on him. That recognition fed his vanity. He offered her his private business card, ignoring the faint voice in his head that whispered danger. From there, texts and calls flowed freely. Initially, they revolved around discussions of potential ventures. Sasha had clients in Russia interested in investing in high-yield American funds, and Daniel had the perfect opening for them at Morgan Capital Ventures. In between these corporate dealings, casual banter turned into playful flirtation. He rationalized it as building rapport. After all, relationships were everything in business, weren't they? Before long, they shared late-night dinners at exclusive clubs, sipping on vintage wines worth thousands of dollars per bottle. Sasha was bold, constantly challenging Daniel's beliefs about how he should run his empire. Her ambition matched his own, sparking a fire in him that he hadn't felt in a while. She never seemed to tire, always pushing him to chase bigger deals and take bolder risks. Within a few months, their relationship crossed the boundary between professional and personal. Perhaps it was the adrenaline of closing a multi-million-dollar deal that left them giddy, or the enchanting ambiance of a luxurious penthouse suite overlooking the New York skyline. One night, after toasting each other's success, they ended up in a passionate embrace. It was a betrayal to Eleanor, and deep down Daniel knew it. Yet he refused to dwell on the moral implications, convincing himself that he deserved this excitement for how hard he worked. Word of his involvement with Sasha began to trickle through the rumor mill, when a reporter hinted at having seen Daniel with a mystery woman at an upscale lounge. Daniel's PR team leaped into crisis management mode. They concocted a story about an important Russian client. No one was to speak a word of it to Eleanor, and for a while the press accepted that narrative. After all, Daniel Morgan was a happily married man, expecting a child. Why would he throw that away? Behind the scenes, Daniel was living a double life, balancing his pregnant wife at home and his ambitious, sultry mistress in hotel suites across the city. He grew adept at deception, scheduling Sasha around his wife's doctor appointments, He always had a ready excuse: a late conference call with international investors, an emergency board meeting. Elena, absorbed in her blossoming pregnancy, trusted him. The little doubts that pricked her mind, like the occasional whiff of perfume on his suit or the vague text messages on his phone, were easily dismissed. She had faith in Daniel's love for her and their child, but as Sasha's demands for more of Daniel's time intensified, so did the tension. The once exhilarating affair began to feel like an encumbrance, adding logistical hurdles to an already busy life. Sasha was not content to remain in the shadows indefinitely. She believed she was worthy of the spotlight, that her relationship with Daniel was more real than the one he had with Elena. She pushed him to acknowledge their bond publicly, to bring her into his social circles, to treat her less like a secret liaison and more like a partner. Daniel found himself at a crossroads. On one hand, he couldn't fathom scandalizing his public image with a very public affair. On the other, Sasha's fervor matched his own desire for power and excitement. She understood his ambition in a way Elena never could. At least that was the narrative he fed himself. The day Daniel decided to introduce Elena to Sasha was ordinary in many ways. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows, casting light on Elena's growing belly. She was in her second trimester, feeling the flutters of new life within her. She had just put away a book of baby names, when Daniel approached her with a proposal that made her pause fork, suspended in mid-air over her bowl of fresh fruit. He spoke with an air of casual detachment, as though suggesting a simple dinner with a colleague. "Elena," he said, clearing his throat, "there's someone I'd like you to meet. She's a client. Well, more of a business associate. Her name is Sasha Kulikova. She's from Russia and might be visiting us often." He chose each word carefully, as though a delicate negotiation was taking place, which in a sense it was. "I think it would be lovely if you two got along. You know, show her some of the museums, maybe invite her to your upcoming gallery events." Elena blinked, trying to decipher the motives behind this uncharacteristic request. While Daniel did often entertain clients, rarely did he ask her to befriend them. She decided to trust him, as always attributing his unusual tone to the stress of managing an expanding empire while preparing for fatherhood. "Sure," she replied hesitantly. "If you think that's best for your business, I'm happy to help. But why me?" Daniel's heart pounded. Sasha appreciates art and culture. You could show her aspects of the city that only a true curator would know. It'll help her feel comfortable here, so she'll be more willing to invest with us. The explanation sounded logical enough on the surface, and Elena's warm nature didn't require much convincing to help a newcomer settle in. She agreed, thinking she was simply supporting her husband's business. That night, Daniel could barely sleep, mind swirling with half-formed strategies on how to juggle his mistress and his wife under the same roof. He convinced himself that if he could just orchestrate this friendship, everything would fall into place. Days later, the meeting was set. Daniel arranged a dinner at the penthouse to present Elena to Sasha. He meticulously planned every detail. The menu showcased exotic fusion dishes from a celebrity chef. The house was adorned with fresh flowers, Elena's favorites, white lilies and peonies. He even had a string quartet softly playing in the corner to exude an air of refined elegance. Sasha arrived gliding through the door in a sleek black dress that emphasized her statuesque figure. Her sharp gaze instantly swept the room, taking in every detail: the crystal chandeliers, the museum-quality artwork on the walls, and finally, Eleanor, who stood somewhat shyly in her maternity dress. Eleanor extended a hand with a polite smile. "It's so nice to finally meet you. Daniel has told me a lot about your business ventures. I hear you're expanding into American markets." Sasha's lips curled into a slight smile, though her eyes flickered with a hint of rivalry. Yes, I specialize in luxury imports. Daniel has been quite helpful in introducing me to the right people. Throughout the evening, the conversation flowed in stops and starts. Sasha and Elena discovered a shared interest in European art, especially Russian Impressionists, whom Elena had studied in school. Their mutual appreciation acted as a neutral topic, smoothing over any underlying tensions. Daniel observed them from across the table, simultaneously. Anxious and satisfied that his gamble might just work, by dessert, Daniel felt a mixture of relief and triumph. His pregnant wife and his mistress hadn't exposed him. In fact, they were talking cordially, even planning a visit to a renowned museum exhibit. He convinced himself that this arrangement would allow him to keep both worlds in perfect balance, an optimistic delusion that would soon unravel. As the night ended and Sasha departed, Elena couldn't shake a lingering sense of unease. She chalked it up to pregnancy hormones and the stress of meeting an important client. Daniel, noticing her pensive mood, wrapped an arm around her. "Everything will be fine," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "We're building a life, our baby, and a future filled with success." Elena smiled, though a shadow lingered in her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe that the man she married was incapable of betrayal, but sometimes reality has a way of creeping in. No matter how deeply, one wishes to remain in the realm of hope. One evening, Elena opened Daniel's laptop to quickly look up a recipe, only to find the screen filled with an email thread featuring Sasha's name. Out of curiosity, or perhaps an unacknowledged suspicion, she skimmed a few lines. Her heart pounded as she read flirtatious messages about their special time together in a suite at the Plaza Hotel. The nauseating reality of it slammed into her. She felt as though the ground had crumbled beneath her feet, sending her plummeting into a void. Elena quickly shut the laptop. She desperately wanted to confront Daniel, but a cocktail of emotions, shock, betrayal, humiliation, kept her silent. She worried about the stress it might inflict on her pregnancy. She also realized how meticulously Daniel had orchestrated everything from the timing of phone calls to the introduction of Sasha as a friend. How could he do this to her while she was carrying his child over the next week? Elena vacillated between denial and sorrow. She tried to maintain appearances, forcing herself to smile during lunches with Sasha or dinner parties with Daniel's associates. But inside, she was unraveling. The once soft, comforting presence she prided herself on became overshadowed by pangs of insecurity and heartbreak. What gnawed at her the most was Daniel's audacity, his brazen introduction of Sasha into Elena's own social circle. It seemed so needlessly cruel, as if he believed his power, charm, and success would shield him from the consequences of lying. Perhaps he even found it thrilling to juggle two women in such close proximity. At night, lying awake, Elena would run a hand gently over her stomach, tears slipping down her cheeks as she thought of the life growing within her. This baby was innocent in all of this, and she vowed to protect her child, no matter the cost. She began formulating her next steps, whether to confront Daniel, confide in a friend, or even reach out to Sasha for the truth. Her instincts told her that something more complex was at play than just a simple affair. As her suspicions intensified, so did her determination. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She was fighting for her own sense of self-worth and for the unborn child who deserved a stable future. She had no idea what that future might look like or what heartbreaks lay ahead, but she was done playing the unsuspecting wife. Quietly, Elena resolved to uncover the full extent of Daniel's betrayal. She would find a way to confront both him and Sasha, to glean the truth behind the facade of business deals and contrived friendships. Yet she had no inkling of the tangled web of secrets and alliances that would soon enfold her, and certainly no idea how those alliances would someday shift to bring about Daniel's ruin. Sasha Kulikova had navigated life on her own terms from a young age. Born in St. Petersburg, she spent her childhood amidst grandeur, tinged with the remnants of Soviet austerity. Her father, a history professor, instilled in her an appreciation for culture and art, while her mother, a pragmatic accountant, taught her the value of financial security. By the time Sasha was 16, both parents had passed, leaving her with a small inheritance and a resolute will to survive. She launched her first business, a tiny boutique selling artisan crafts, while still in college. Though the boutique never garnered massive profits, it taught Sasha the art of negotiation and the importance of style and image. After graduation, she ventured into the import-export realm quickly, learning which goods had the highest markup and how to build relationships with influential people. By 30, she was moderately wealthy, respected in certain European business circles, and driven by an insatiable hunger for more. When she met Daniel Morgan, she saw in him a kindred spirit, someone who wanted everything life had to offer and refused to apologize for it. Their initial business dealings crackled with intellectual chemistry. She admired his ruthlessness in finance, his ability to read a room, and his unwavering self-confidence. At first, their affair was just another power play for Sasha, a way to keep Daniel close so she could leverage his connections in the American market. But then emotions complicated matters. Beneath Sasha's cool exterior lay an ache for validation and love. She had spent years in transactional relationships where her beauty and success were tools, not cherished qualities. With Daniel, she felt recognized for her ambition and cunning. He spoke her language of high-stakes deals and midnight phone calls to close on million-dollar investments. Their affair became an intoxicating game of strategy. Sasha was convinced that eventually Daniel would tire of his simpleton wife, her words for Elena, and choose the more dynamic partner. Sasha wasn't blind to the moral quagmire, yet she rationalized it. If Elena lacked the savvy to keep Daniel interested, was that truly Sasha's fault? Love was war, and she fully intended to win. However, the moment Daniel proposed that she befriend Elena, Sasha hesitated. The idea of regularly seeing the woman whose place in Daniel's life she hoped to usurp was unsettling, but Daniel assured her it was necessary for the sake of appearances. He also dangled the prospect of deeper financial ties, introductions to top American investors, co-founding a new venture, and more. Besides, if Sasha was truly the rightful partner for Daniel, might it not be satisfying to see Elena up close and confirm her own superiority? Despite her initial reluctance, Sasha played along. She showcased her charm, delved into art discussions with genuine enthusiasm, and did her best to maintain a veneer of politeness around Elena. Yet she occasionally caught glimmers of authenticity in the pregnant wife's eyes, moments that unsettled Sasha's conscience. She saw Elena's gentleness, her genuine curiosity about Russian art, and her open-hearted approach to life. Was it possible that Sasha was robbing this woman of a happiness she had never truly appreciated until now? This moral dilemma gnawed at her. Sasha started to sense that Daniel might not be as in control as she'd once believed. He painted a picture of a marriage on the rocks of a career-driven man, unfulfilled by his demure spouse. But Elena didn't appear demure or uninteresting. She seemed kind, well-educated, and wholly committed to building a peaceful life. Could Daniel be exaggerating the problems in his marriage to justify his affair? That suspicion stung Sasha's pride, and made her question her role in the duplicity. Nevertheless, her ambition remained the final arbiter of her actions. She had placed a significant bet on Daniel, both financially and emotionally. Their synergy was too potent to abandon over a few pangs of guilt. Sasha told herself that people in high places rarely played by the rules. They made their own, and if Eleanor was naive enough to believe in a fairy tale marriage that was her failing, still cracks were forming in Sasha's resolve. She felt them every time Eleanor offered a genuine smile or asked about her life in Russia, every time Eleanor reached out to Sasha as a friend. Sasha felt a pang of something she'd always suppressed: empathy, a deep human connection that she had learned to stifle in the pursuit of success. Conflicted, Sasha found herself in a precarious dance. She needed Daniel for her ambitions, but she couldn't entirely silence the part of her that questioned the moral price of her choices. The weeks wore on, and Elena's pregnancy advanced. She no longer merely suspected Daniel's infidelity. She knew. The final confirmation came when she scrolled through social media and stumbled upon a tagged photo from a private lounge event. Daniel stood beside Sasha, their body language far too intimate for two people who were supposedly just business associates. Daniel's hand rested at Sasha's lower back, and both wore secretive smiles. Elena felt her heart drop, her breathing turning shallow. The betrayal was now undeniable. For a moment, she contemplated confronting them publicly, making a scene at Daniel's office, or even exposing him to the tabloids he courted. Yet her quieter instincts prevailed. She needed answers, and more importantly, she needed a plan. That evening, Daniel came home, late, smelling of expensive cologne and a hint of floral perfume that was not hers. Elena sat on the living room couch, waiting, a stack of papers on her lap. The tension in the room was palpable as Daniel set his briefcase down. "Elena, you're up?" he asked, feigning casualness. She met his eyes, her voice steady. "We need to talk, Daniel." He stiffened. "Now it's late. Can it wait until morning?" "No." She held out a folder. "I had a friend at a private investigative firm look into some suspicions I've had. This is what he found." Reluctantly, Daniel flipped open the folder. Photographs tumbled out. Pictures of him and Sasha entering hotels, stepping out of nightclubs, even sharing an intimate moment in a parked limousine. The blood drained from Daniel's face, and his carefully crafted composure cracked. "How dare you!" he began, anger coloring his tone. Elena cut him off, tears brimming. Don't you dare blame me for wanting to know the truth. I'm carrying our child, Daniel. I deserve honesty at the very least." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Elena, it's complicated, is it?" She scoffed. "'Cause it looks quite clear. You're cheating on me with that woman, Sasha, and you had the audacity to bring her into my life as if we could be friends." Realizing the gravity of the situation, Daniel shifted to damage control, adopting a remorseful expression. He reached for her hand, but she recoiled. "Elena, listen, it just happened. Business trips, late nights, it got out of hand. I never meant for you to get hurt." Elena's fury bubbled to the surface. "You never meant for me to get hurt yet. You introduced us, encouraged me to spend time with her, even while I'm pregnant with your child." She stood trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. "I'm not a fool, Daniel. You've made me look like one, but I'm done. I want you out, at least until I decide what to do next." His eyes widened. "Leave. This is my home. It's our home, and you've lost the privilege of calling it yours for now." She pressed her lips together, her voice quavering. "I'm going to my mother's for a few days. I don't want you here." when I get back, caught off guard by her resoluteness. Daniel scrambled. Elena, be reasonable. Think about our child. Think about the scandal. That's all you care about, isn't it? Your reputation, she spat, tears finally spilling over. You've left me no choice but to protect my dignity and the well-being of our baby. Daniel tried to protest, but the sight of Elena shaking, cradling her belly protectively, silenced him. He wanted to accuse her of overreacting, to remind her of how vital his work was, but the words died in his throat. The woman before him was no longer the gentle, accommodating wife he'd grown used to. This was someone wounded, yet fiercely protective of her unborn child, and she exuded a strength he hadn't anticipated. That night, Elena packed a small suitcase and called a car service. She left Daniel in the echoing silence of their penthouse, unable to stop the tide that had broken. As she stared out the car window, her tears finally flowed unchecked. She felt more alone than ever, but also resolute. She would not let this betrayal break her or diminish her role as a future mother. With Eleanor gone from the penthouse, Daniel found himself in a panic. Publicly, nothing had changed. He continued to show up at board meetings, philanthropic events, and power lunches with the same veneer of assured success. However, behind the scenes, his home life teetered on the brink of collapse. He spent sleepless nights in the master bedroom, chain-smoking cigars he typically reserved for celebratory moments, pondering how to salvage the situation. Meanwhile, Sasha sensed the shift she had expected to hear from Daniel about Elena's reaction, perhaps some triumphant note that he was finally free to be with her. Instead, Daniel's calls became terse and infrequent. When she pressed him for details, he brushed her off with vague statements like, "I'm handling it," or "Don't worry, this is just a rough patch." The distance disconcerted her, igniting a new wave of insecurities. Had Daniel merely been using her to spark excitement in his life, never intending to truly leave Elena? Unable to endure the silence, Sasha decided to take matters into her own hands. She cornered Daniel after a late-night business function at the top floor of the Peninsula Hotel. Over champagne in the dimly lit lounge, she demanded answers. "Tell me the truth. What is happening with Elena? You promised me a future. Daniel, don't act like this is all going to magically work out without my involvement." Daniel sighed, swirling the last drops of champagne in his flute. "Sasha, I don't need a lecture right now. My entire life is in chaos. Elena left and might go public with this, and I can't afford a scandal that tanks my business. Investors are skittish. If they catch wind of a messy divorce, it could jeopardize everything I've built." She leaned in, unrelenting. "So what is your plan? You can't just ignore me. I'm part of your life now." He set the champagne flute down with a clang that resonated more than he intended. "I know, and I'm not ignoring you. But things need to be handled carefully. If Eleanor goes nuclear, the fallout could destroy us both. Her father has political connections. One phone call could bring regulators down on my firm. Not to mention the press would love to expose the next Warren Buffett as a philandering fraud." Sasha's determination hardened. "Then we need a strategic approach. We can't let Elena control the narrative. If she's away, this might be our best chance to get ahead of the story." Daniel ran his hand over his face. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? If I go public about our relationship, it'll be a feeding frenzy. My brand is family-friendly philanthropy and integrity." A mistress wasn't in the equation. A flicker of hurt crossed Sasha's eyes, but she steadied her voice. "So I'm just a liability." He hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but this is the real world, Sasha. Image matters. We can't waltz off into the sunset without consequences, realizing the precariousness of their situation. Sasha took a deep breath. Then we need to control how the story breaks. Maybe frame it as something amicable, and we also need to secure the future of our business partnership. You said it yourself. You need me for expanding Morgan Capital Ventures internationally, and I need you for American investments. Daniel saw a glimmer of logic in her words, though his pride balked at the idea of letting Sasha dictate terms. Fine. We plan a joint venture, present ourselves as unstoppable allies in business, and keep our personal involvement under wraps as long as possible. If Elena tries to bring a scandal to the media, we can counteract it by emphasizing how crucial our partnership is for philanthropic work. People love a redemption angle. Sasha nodded, though a pang of guilt nipped at her. She knew Elena was pregnant alone and likely devastated, but Sasha's desire to protect her own interests and to remain tethered to Daniel trumped any fleeting remorse. Then let's do it. But I want your reassurance that once the dust settles, we move forward together. I won't be sidelined. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long breath. Deal, he said, extending his hand. They shook on it, forging a tenuous alliance based on damage control, mutual ambition, and the carefully hidden undercurrent of their affair. Yet alliances built on precarious foundations are often the first to crumble under stress. While Daniel and Sasha plotted their strategy, Elena was quietly seeking her own form of resolution. She spent time confiding in a close friend, a high-powered attorney named Rachel Northwood, who specialized in family law. Rachel encouraged her to gather evidence and consider a prenuptial loophole that could grant Elena significant leverage if she decided to file for divorce. Elena listened, torn between heartbreak and the pragmatic need to protect her child. Daniel may have built an empire, but Elena was beginning to realize she was not powerless. As pieces moved across the board, Daniel aligning with Sasha, Sasha trying to secure her stake, and Elena strategizing her next step, an unseen chess match was unfolding. Each believed they had a winning strategy, but the game was far from over. Elena spent several weeks at her mother's home, a cozy Victorian house in Westchester County. The quiet suburb offered a respite from the whirlwind of Manhattan. It also allowed her time to gather her thoughts and seek legal counsel. She was determined not to let Daniel's betrayal define her or dictate the future of her child. One crisp afternoon, she received a call from an unlikely source, Sasha Kulikova. The name on her phone's screen sent a chill through Elena. After hesitating for several rings, she pressed, "Answer, Elena." "It's Sasha," came the voice on the other end, tentative, tinged with nerves. "Please don't hang up. I need to speak with you." Elena's pulse quickened. "What could you possibly have to say to me?" Sasha paused. "I know I have no right to ask anything of you given what's happened. But there's something you need to know about Daniel. It's urgent and it affects us both." Against her better judgment, Elena's curiosity got the better of her. She agreed to meet Sasha at a discreet cafe in the neighboring town, ensuring they were far from the prying eyes of the city's gossip columns. Arriving at the cafe, Elena found Sasha seated in a corner booth, dressed in a simple coat far removed from her usual glamour. They eyed each other warily for a moment before Elena spoke. "This had better be good. I don't have the emotional bandwidth for more drama." Sasha nodded, clasping her hands around a steaming mug of tea. "I'll get straight to the point. I've discovered some discrepancies in Daniel's finances, offshore accounts, investments in shell companies. It looks like he's funneling money away from Morgan Capital Ventures into private funds." Elena blinked, trying to process the information. "Why are you telling me this?" Because it's illegal for one, Sasha said, her voice trembling slightly. And because he might be using these accounts to hedge against the scandal if you divorce him, he could leave you with little to no assets, all while protecting his own hidden wealth. Elena felt her stomach twist. She knew Daniel was ambitious, ruthless even. But had he really stooped to potential criminal activity? You're sure about this? I've seen the documents. He bragged to me once about how no one would ever outsmart him. But I never realized he was actively shifting assets. When I confronted him, he brushed me off, said it was none of my business. But if he's setting you up for financial ruin, it is your business. Elena studied Sasha's face. There were no traces of the smug, seductive woman who had humiliated her by sleeping with her husband. Instead, Sasha seemed genuinely concerned, and perhaps a little afraid. Why are you helping me? If you and Daniel are so in love, why not protect him? Sasha broke eye contact. I'm not so sure about our relationship anymore. He's turning paranoid, accusing me of prying too much. And frankly, I didn't sign up to be involved in a fraud scandal. If the feds come knocking, I'm not going down with him. Elena let out a shaky breath. The layers of deceit seemed endless. So what do we do? Hire an investigator. Expose him. That's why I'm here. I'm prepared to testify or share evidence, if it comes to that. But only if I'm protected. We need leverage, or Daniel will bury us both, legally and publicly. A whirlwind of emotions swept through Elena. Anger, betrayal, relief that she had an unexpected ally, and a flicker of hope that she might regain some control over her life. All right, she said quietly. I'll talk to my lawyer. We'll see what can be done, Sasha. Nodded relief evident in her eyes. They sat in silence for a few moments, two women drawn together by the very man who had harmed them both. Before parting ways, Sasha hesitated, then added softly, Eleanor, I'm sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you. I thought Daniel and I thought what we had was real. But now I see that he treats everyone as a means to an end. Eleanor swallowed hard tears, threatening to break free. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, she admitted. But thank you for telling me this. Maybe we can salvage something good out of a terrible situation. They parted with a tentative sense of camaraderie, an uneasy alliance formed from shared betrayal. Both women were determined not to let Daniel continue wielding power over their lives. Sasha left with a renewed sense of purpose, and Elena drove home, her mind buzzing with legal strategies and protective measures for her child. Unbeknownst to them, Daniel had begun to suspect that Sasha's loyalty was wavering. He'd placed a private investigator on her tail, fearful that his mistress might be cooperating with Eleanor. Each passing day tightened the noose around Daniel's secrets. He would soon learn that no matter how cunning or resourceful one might be, betraying two women, one carrying his child, the other armed with insider information, came with consequences that not even a millionaire could evade forever. In the weeks that followed, a careful dance played out. Elena, guided by her attorney Rachel Northwood, quietly gathered every shred of evidence Sasha had provided, investment documents, offshore bank records, and cryptic emails between Daniel and unknown associates. They compiled a dossier substantial enough to threaten Daniel's entire empire, but they needed impeccable timing before making a move. Meanwhile, Sasha maintained her facade of loyalty to Daniel, attending business meetings alongside him and smiling at photo ops for the press. She played the role of the devoted partner in Morgan Capital Ventures' latest expansion into Eastern Europe, all while quietly feeding updates to Eleanor and Rachel. It was a high-wire act, and Sasha sometimes lost sleep, weighed down by guilt and fear. But her survival instincts prevailed. She couldn't risk Daniel discovering her duplicity before their plan was airtight. Daniel sensed tension beneath the surface, but believed he still had the upper hand. He spent long hours in private conferences, shoring up his personal investments, and even consulting with shadowy financial advisors who specialized in concealing large sums of money. Paranoia gnawed at him. Yet he was convinced that if he moved swiftly, he could outmaneuver Elena's legal claims. Outside of the office, the public facade of Morgan Capital Ventures remained pristine. Daniel appeared in glossy magazine features about philanthropic projects, new schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, grants for young entrepreneurs. He sat on panels discussing the ethical responsibilities of the modern magnate. Photographers captured him, signing multi-million-dollar deals with a confident smile. No one suspected that behind the scenes, his precarious tower of wealth teetered dangerously close to collapse. Then came the first blow, a regulatory inquiry. A subordinate in Daniel's firm, weary of his bullying management style and fearful of potential legal repercussions, tipped off the Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) to irregular trading activities. The inquiry started small, just a few calls and letters requesting additional documentation, but Daniel recognized the threat immediately. If the SEC began digging, they might uncover the offshore accounts. He scrambled to bury evidence and coerced his staff into silence with promises of bonuses or threats of retaliation. This only incited more suspicion. As the SEC's inquiries escalated, rumors started to swirl within the financial world. Investors once dazzled by Daniel's near-magical ability to turn profits became skittish. Stock values connected to Morgan Capital Ventures wobbled, and major clients began withdrawing their funds, fearing a scandal that might freeze their assets. Eleanor observed these developments from a distance, torn between grim satisfaction and lingering sadness. She remembered the man she had married, the visionary, the dreamer, and questioned how he had devolved into someone willing to compromise everything for unbridled ambition. Regardless, she pushed forward. Her unborn child's welfare superseded any nostalgia. As the walls closed in, Daniel made a desperate attempt to broker a peace with Eleanor. He showed up unannounced at her mother's house one sunny afternoon, wearing a somber expression. Elena's mother answered the door and quickly summoned her daughter. The tension was palpable as they stood face to face on the front porch. "Elena, please," he said, voice cracking. "We need to talk. The SEC is breathing down my neck. I'm willing to make a deal. I'll give you anything you want. Property trust funds for the baby. Just don't go public with any allegations." Elena eyed him coldly. "You're only here because you're cornered, not because you're remorseful." He exhaled sharply. "I am remorseful. I messed up. I let the pressure get to me." She cut him off. "It's too late for excuses, Daniel. You brought this on yourself. You think you can buy my silence? What about the affairs, the lies, the offshore accounts? You're looking at legal repercussions well beyond the scope of a simple divorce." His face reddened. "We can handle this quietly if we work together. Our child deserves a stable future." A mirthless laugh escaped her lips. "You should have considered that before you lied, cheated and tried to hide your assets. My attorney will be in touch. Now leave," feeling the weight of impending doom. Daniel drove away in a rage. That evening he tried to confront Sasha in his penthouse about her loyalties, but she sidestepped his questions, claiming ignorance of any conspiracy with Eleanor. Unconvinced, Daniel considered cutting her off entirely, but he still needed her business connections in Eastern Europe to keep certain clients from fleeing. He was trapped, forced to maintain alliances he no longer trusted. Behind the scenes, the SEC probe intensified. Investigators subpoenaed phone records, emails, and financial statements. Strained employees hinted at the existence of shell companies and backdoor deals. Media outlets picked up whispers of a looming scandal. Overnight, Daniel Morgan shifted from the darling of the financial press to a question mark. Was this rising star actually a fraud? The siege on Daniel's empire had begun in earnest, and while he scrambled to patch the leaks, Elena and Sasha watched from the sidelines, each with their own motives, but united in a shared objective: to ensure Daniel Morgan could no longer manipulate their lives with impunity. The final act of his downfall was fast approaching, and when it came, it would strike with a force that left no part of his once mighty empire unscathed. Events came to a head. One brisk morning, when Daniel was summoned for a formal deposition at an SEC office in downtown Manhattan. Cameras flashed outside the building, capturing his taut expression as he refused to comment. The hearing room was austere, the fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on the polished wooden tables. Daniel faced a panel of investigators armed with reams of paper and pointed questions. Months of rumor and speculation had coalesced into concrete allegations: insider trading, wire fraud, and money laundering. Daniel staunchly denied the charges, presenting himself as a victim of overzealous regulators. He had brought along a team of high-priced attorneys who confidently argued that Morgan Capital Ventures was fully compliant, that certain transactions were standard business practices in global finance. But the SEC had a trump card: newly acquired evidence from an inside source, unbeknownst to Daniel. Sasha had provided key documents carefully curated by Elena and Rachel Northwood. These papers demonstrated how funds were systematically transferred from Morgan Capital Ventures into shell companies linked to Daniel's personal offshore accounts. The evidence was damning, painting a picture of deliberate, repeated fraud. When the SEC investigators unveiled this evidence, Daniel's complexion turned ashen. He quickly glanced at his lead attorney, who frantically whispered into his ear. They requested a recess, but the damage was done. Word of the new evidence spread like wildfire among the assembled reporters and observers. By the time Daniel left the hearing, flanked by security, the phrase "criminal charges" was already on every journalist's tongue. Outside, the media throng descended, peppering Daniel with questions about the mistress, the wife, and the pregnant child. He pushed past them, ignoring the shouted queries. "Mr. Morgan, is it true you siphoned funds? How do you respond to insider trading allegations? Do you have any comment about your affair with Ms. Kulikova?" In the ensuing days, Daniel's empire imploded. Major investors withdrew en masse, triggering a liquidity crisis. Partners distanced themselves, publicly worried about being caught in the crossfire of a criminal investigation. The board of Morgan Capital Ventures convened an emergency session and voted to suspend Daniel from his leadership position, pending the outcome of the SEC's findings. His once sky-high stock valuation plummeted, leaving him on the brink of bankruptcy. Meanwhile, Sasha made her final move. She sold her shares in Morgan Capital Ventures shares Daniel had given her in the early days of their affair. Just before the scandal broke to the mainstream press, she netted a tidy sum enough to shield her from financial collapse. She also discreetly leaked news of her business expansions outside of Morgan Capital Ventures, earning cautious praise for distancing herself from the scandal. Though her own reputation took a hit for being connected to Daniel, she managed to present herself as a victim and cooperated fully with investigators, thus avoiding criminal culpability. Eleanor observed all of this from a safe vantage point, her newborn baby now cradled in her arms. She gave birth 2 weeks before the scandal became public. Finding solace in motherhood, even as Daniel's world crumbled, she had chosen not to inform him of the birth directly. She saw no point in contacting a man who had shown such disregard for her well-being. When Daniel finally learned he had a son, it came via a terse legal notice from Rachel Northwood, demanding child support and spousal provisions based on the prenuptial agreement. Given the new evidence of fraud, Elena had a strong case to claim additional damages if she wished. She tried not to dwell on the once romantic image of Daniel holding their child in his arms. Reality proved harsher. The father of her baby was now a disgraced businessman under criminal investigation. Caught in a vortex of legal battles with his finances frozen, Daniel barely had time to process fatherhood. He made one final attempt to contact Eleanor, leaving a voicemail that alternated between pleas for forgiveness and offers to provide for the baby. But Eleanor never called back. The moment for redemption had passed. The final betrayal was complete. Sasha, his lover-ally and co-conspirator, had sold him out to save herself, while Elena, his wife, the mother of his child, had set the legal system in motion to protect her future. Daniel was left with a fraction of his once vast fortune, a tarnished reputation, and the prospect of standing trial. Everything he had prized, wealth, power, status, slipped through his fingers like sand, and the question that haunted him in the lonely echoes of his now emptied penthouse was not how he had lost it all, but why. Perhaps the answer lay in the mirror, in the man who believed he could have it all without consequence. Less than a year after the scandal broke, Daniel Morgan sat in a nearly empty courtroom, awaiting the final judgment on his financial misdeeds. The courtroom was sparse, the gallery seats mostly filled with curious onlookers, and a few reporters hoping to glean a final, sensational headline. His once formidable legal team had been reduced to a single overworked defense attorney after he could no longer afford the high-end firm that initially represented him. As the judge read the verdict guilty on multiple counts of wire fraud and money laundering, Daniel's chest tightened. He was ordered to pay substantial fines and faced a looming prison sentence. The final blow came when the court ruled on Elena's civil claims. With the evidence of marital misconduct and fraudulent asset concealment, she was awarded full custody of their child, substantial child support, and half of whatever legal assets remained after the criminal penalties. Outside the courthouse, the air was heavy with rain. Daniel stepped out under a canopy of umbrellas held by paparazzi, who jostled to snap his picture. Rainwater and flash photography combined in a disorienting swirl. Gone was the confident mogul who once ruled Manhattan's financial circles. In his place stood a man beaten by a series of poor choices, and hubris karma had arrived in full force, stripping away every vestige of his meticulously curated life. His penthouse was sold to cover legal fees. His board membership at various philanthropic organizations was revoked. His name had become synonymous with disgrace in the business community. Former friends distanced themselves, shutting doors that once swung open at his mere request. Sasha, meanwhile, thrived. She relocated her business operations to London, rebranding herself as an international consultant. Through calculated public relations efforts, she emerged relatively unscathed, occasionally giving interviews in which she lamented how she too had been duped by Daniel Morgan's false promises. She played the remorseful partner, capitalizing on the scandal to broaden her network with other powerful financiers who admired her resilience. Daniel, for his part, spent many hours in jail, grappling with regret. He regretted the affair, but more than that, he regretted the arrogance that led him to believe he could manipulate people without consequences. He'd lost his wife's love, missed the birth of his only child, and destroyed the empire he'd spent his life building. And for what? A fleeting thrill, a misguided sense of invincibility. On the day he was officially sentenced, Daniel gave a short statement, voice trembling. "I accept responsibility for my actions. I hope one day to earn forgiveness from those I've hurt, especially my family." But he knew forgiveness was not guaranteed, and any redemption he might find would be long in coming. Outside the prison gates, life went on. Elena's world blossomed with her baby boy, her art exhibits, and the supportive circle of friends who rallied around her. Sasha continued her ascent in high society, spinning the narrative of her involvement with Daniel to her advantage. And somewhere in a corner cell, Daniel Morgan faced the harsh reality of karma, reflecting on how easily he'd thrown away what truly mattered: integrity, trust, and love. Several years passed, and a new chapter began for Elena. Oliver was now toddling around, bright-eyed and full of curiosity. Elena had moved out of her mother's place and found a charming townhouse in a Brooklyn neighborhood renowned for its artistic community. Paint splatters and sculptures adorned every corner of her home, a testament to the creative sanctuary she'd built for herself and her son. Professionally, she excelled. The scandal surrounding Daniel had ironically elevated her profile in the art world. Gallery owners empathized with her struggles and admired her dignified composure through adversity. She established a consulting firm, helping up-and-coming artists launch their careers, and curated specialized exhibitions focusing on underrepresented communities. Her once modest aspirations had flourished into a fulfilling mission that paid well and garnered respect. Sasha remained in Europe, where she'd carved out a niche as a savvy business consultant specializing in cross-border transactions. Rumor had it she was seeing a French banker, though she kept her personal life discreet. Despite their uneasy alliance, Elena occasionally exchanged polite emails with Sasha. Once, when Elena traveled to London for a gallery, showing they even shared a brief coffee, it was awkward yet cordial, an unspoken acknowledgement that they'd both survived a tumultuous chapter of their lives. Daniel's incarceration was not particularly harsh, but it was long enough to leave a lasting impression. He spent his days in the prison library, reading voraciously everything from classics in philosophy to books on emotional intelligence. He took part in financial literacy programs for other inmates, a form of community service that strangely brought him a measure of satisfaction. Though he was still many steps away from redemption, he felt a seed of hope that his life wasn't entirely over. His biggest regret remained the family he had shattered. One afternoon, Eleanor received a letter from Daniel. He wrote that he was due for a parole hearing soon and wanted to see if she would allow him any role in Oliver's life. The words were remorseful and introspective, acknowledging the pain he had caused. He didn't ask for a reconciliation, only a chance to know his son. Elena read the letter multiple times, weighing what was best for Oliver. She recognized Daniel's guilt, but she also remembered the cruelty of his deceit. After many sleepless nights and discussions with her mother, she decided she would allow supervised visitation if and when Daniel was released. She believed people could change, and her child deserved the opportunity to know his father, but only under safe conditions. Over the next few months, Daniel and Oliver formed a tenuous bond. The visits were awkward, but gradually became more comfortable. Eleanor, still wary, noticed Daniel's earnest attempts to connect with the boy. She remained guarded, but a small part of her recognized a glimmer of authenticity in Daniel's regret. Only time would tell if it would grow into genuine redemption. In her personal life, Elena found love again in a fellow curator who admired her dedication to the arts and cherished Oliver as if he were his own. The three of them built a life full of creativity and warmth, a gentle healing counterpoint to the trauma she'd endured. Occasionally, Elena would reflect on the twists of fate that brought her to this moment: her heartbreak, her unexpected alliance with Sasha, and the devastating downfall of Daniel Morgan. Each step had led her to reclaim her own power, forging a future she never anticipated. Through betrayal and loss, she found a resilient spirit she hadn't known resided within her, Karma had served Daniel a crushing blow, but it had also steered Elena toward a destiny of independence, purpose, and self-discovery. Thank you for journeying through this tumultuous tale of love, betrayal, and hard-won redemption. From Daniel's glittering rise to his spectacular downfall, we witnessed how arrogance and deceit can unravel even the most carefully curated life. Yet within the ruins, two strong women, Elena and Sasha, emerged, both reshaping their futures and discovering a resilience they never knew they possessed. This drama reminds us that actions always have consequences, and that karma can strike in unexpected ways. If this story gripped your heart and kept you on the edge of your seat, do take a moment to support this channel. Like this video. If you found it riveting, share it with friends who appreciate a deep dive into human ambition and vulnerability, and subscribe to stay updated on more dramatic and real-life inspired tales. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that resonate and inspire. Thank you for watching.
The pen hovered over the line. The only sound in the $1,000 an hour boardroom was the quiet hum of the air conditioner. She signed the papers quietly, her hand not shaking once. She was now officially divorced, penniless, and cast aside by her powerful husband. He smirked, watching her walk out of the Park Avenue law firm with nothing but her handbag. But he didn't see the black Maybach that slid to the curb seconds later. He didn't see her get in. And he couldn't imagine that just 30 minutes later, she would be sitting beside a secretive billionaire in his private jet, finalizing a plan that would destroy the very empire her ex-husband just fought to keep. The pen was a heavy, obnoxious thing. A solid gold Mont Blanc, the kind her husband Mark would buy in sets of 5 simply because he could. He'd slid it across the vast polished mahogany table with the same dismissive flick of the wrist he used to signal a waiter. "Well, Alice?" Mark said, his voice smooth and dripping with a victor's condescension. "Don't look so glum. You're getting the condo in Miami. You always loved the beach." "Alice Faulkner." "No," she corrected herself. Alice Tierney was her name before this, and it would be her name after. Looked at him. She didn't look at his eyes, which were a cold, satisfied blue. She looked at his tie knot, a perfect tight Windsor chosen to intimidate. Beside him, his lawyer, a shark in a $5,000 Armani suit, shuffled his papers, eager to move on to his next billing hour. Alice's own lawyer, a weary public interest attorney Mark had sneered at, gave her a small, sympathetic nod. The room was the definition of corporate power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, but the glass was so thick it seemed to trap the silence, making it heavy and suffocating. This was Mark's world. A world of glass towers, silent handshakes, and brutal, quiet victories. Today, he believed, was one of those victories. "He's being generous, Alice," Mark's lawyer purred, gesturing to the final page. "Given the circumstances." The circumstances were the fabricated photos of her having lunch with a male friend from college, twisted by Mark's private investigators into an affair. It was a lie, but a lie Mark had wielded with surgical precision to paint her as the unfaithful party, isolating her from their social circle and voiding the prenuptial agreement. Mark got the Hamptons estate. He got the Park Avenue penthouse they were currently in. He got the art collection, the stock portfolio, and Faulkner Holdings, the company he had built. He always said, "From the ground up," conveniently forgetting the $10 million seed money from Alice's inheritance. She was left with a condo she never liked and a one-time payout so small it was a public insult. Alice picked up the pen. She looked at the final signature line. Alice Faulkner. She remembered the nights she'd spent tracing the lines of his company's finances, the nights she'd listened to him brag on the phone about his creative accounting and how he was burying a competitor with a new patent. He'd always dismissed her. "Don't worry your pretty little head about it, darling. Just make sure the catering for the gala is perfect." She'd stopped worrying. She'd started listening. She'd started remembering. "Alice, we don't have all day." Mark sighed, checking his Rolex. Alice met his gaze. Her face was perfectly, devastatingly blank. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She didn't beg. That she knew was what disappointed him the most. He wanted tears. He wanted a scene. He wanted to walk out of this room telling his lawyer how hysterical she was. She gave him nothing. She uncapped the pen. The click was loud in the tomb-like room. Her hand was perfectly steady. She signed her name. But she didn't sign Alice Faulkner. With a clear, defiant stroke, she signed Alice Tierney. Mark scoffed. "A little late for that, isn't it?" She capped the pen and placed it precisely in the center of the table. She stood up. Her dress was a simple beige sheath, worth less than the shoes Mark's lawyer was wearing. "Thank you for your time, gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and calm. She turned and walked to the door. "Oh, and Alice," Mark called out, his voice already bored, already moving on. "Don't bother calling my driver. He's busy. I'm sure you can find a cab." Alice paused at the door, her back to him. "I'm sure I will." She walked out of the office, through the marble lobby of the skyscraper, and past the security guards who already looked through her as if she were a ghost. She stepped out onto the sidewalk of Park Avenue. The October air was sharp and the noise of the city hit her like a physical blow. She was divorced. She was, by Mark's standards, ruined. She took a deep breath, clutching the thin strap of her handbag. For the first time in 10 years, she was free. She stood at the curb for exactly 30 seconds. Mark's black Bentley, which had been waiting, pulled away from the curb, deliberately accelerating through a puddle of gutter water, splashing the back of her legs. Alice didn't flinch. She simply watched it go. A moment later, a car so black it seemed to absorb the daylight pulled up to the curb, gliding to a silent stop directly in front of her. It wasn't a Bentley. It was a Maybach S680, a car synonymous with old money and absolute understated power. The rear window lowered, revealing nothing but shadow inside. The driver, dressed in a crisp, dark gray uniform, stepped out. He was tall, with a military bearing. He held the door open for her. "Ms. Tierney," he said, his voice polite and firm. "Mr. Knight is expecting you." Alice looked at the man, then at the opulent waiting interior. She didn't know a Mr. Knight, but her old lawyer had told her, "A car will be waiting, trust the driver, trust the name." She got in. The door closed with a muted vault-like thud, sealing out the entire world. The interior of the Maybach was less like a car and more like a private lounge. The leather was the color of rich cream, and the ambient lighting was a soft, calming amber. There was no sound from the New York traffic outside. It was as if she had entered a different dimension. "Where are we going?" Alice asked, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Teterboro Airport, Ms. Tierney," the driver, whose nameplate identified him as Thomas, replied. He navigated the car through midtown traffic with an effortless, fluid grace, as if the other cars were simply parting for him. Teterboro, the exclusive airport for private jets. Alice's mind raced. Her settlement check, the generous one-time payout, wouldn't even cover the fuel for a trip on a private jet. Mark was the one with the jet, a Bombardier Global 6000 he was keeping. This was something else. This was someone else. "Mr. Knight," she said, testing the name. "I'm afraid I don't know a Mr. Knight." "He knows you, ma'am," Thomas said, his eyes on the road. "He was an old friend. He said to tell you he's cashing in a rain check from a debate tournament, 2009. Alice's breath hitched. 2009. The National Collegiate Debate Championship. Her partner, the brilliant, intense, and absurdly driven scholarship kid who had argued with her, challenged her, and celebrated with her. The one who had disappeared from her life after she'd met Mark. "Damien," she whispered. Thomas glanced at her in the rearview mirror, a small, respectful smile touching his lips. Mr. Damien Knight, yes. It seemed impossible. The last she'd heard, Damien had gone to Silicon Valley to work on some startup. Mark had always sneered at the memory of him. "That glorified tech nerd, He'll be burned out and broke by 30. The Maybach soon left the city behind, pulling through a discreet, unmarked security gate at the Teterboro airfield. It didn't stop at a terminal. It drove directly onto the tarmac, pulling up alongside a machine that defied belief. It was a Gulfstream G700, sleek and predatory, painted a matte pearl gray. It was larger than Mark's jet. It was newer. It was Alice knew from the magazines she used to order for Mark astronomically more expensive. Thomas opened her door. The jet's engines were already humming a low, powerful thrum she could feel in her chest. A flight attendant in a sharp-tailored suit stood at the base of the stairs. "Welcome, Miss Tierney. We've been holding for you," the attendant said, taking Alice's simple handbag. Alice walked up the stairs, each step feeling unreal. The air was cold, smelling of jet fuel and ozone. She was leaving her old life on the tarmac below. She stepped into the cabin. The scent of new leather and roasted coffee filled the air. The interior was a masterpiece of custom design. Dark woods brushed platinum fixtures and plush swiveling armchairs. And sitting in one of those chairs reading a physical Bloomberg newspaper, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, was a man she hadn't seen in 12 years. He looked up. His eyes, a startling, intelligent green, were the same. But everything else was different. The worn-out college sweatshirts were gone, replaced by a dark, bespoke Tom Ford suit. The restless energy was still there, but it was coiled, controlled, and radiating an aura of quiet, unshakable confidence. He folded the newspaper and set it aside. A slow smile spread across his face, the first genuine smile she'd seen directed at her in a decade. "Alice Tierney," said Damien Knight. "You are exactly 34 minutes late. I thought you'd be out of there faster." "You—" Alice stammered, gripping the back of a chair. "Damien, what is this? How did I know?" He stood up. He was taller than she remembered. "I've been following Faulkner Holdings for 18 months. When I saw the divorce filing, I knew he'd try to bury you. I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner, but I had to wait until you were legally clear." Legally clear of him. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please sit. We're on a tight schedule. Wheels up in 5. Alice sank into the cream-colored leather. It was softer than a cloud. "Where are we going?" The engines outside began to build in a crescendo. Damien fastened his seatbelt, his movements economical and precise. "Paris," he said as casually as if he were suggesting coffee. "But first, we have some business to discuss." "What business, Damien? I just signed everything away. I have nothing. Mark, he won." The jet accelerated, pressing Alice back into her seat. The G-force was exhilarating, a sudden powerful push into a new reality. They lifted off the runway, climbing steeply into the sky. Damien watched the New York skyline shrink until it was just a smudge. "That's the thing, Alice," he said, turning to her. "He thinks he won. But Mark Faulkner has been so busy watching his front door he never thought to check his back." "What do you mean?" "I mean," Damien said, taking a slim tablet from the table between them, "that your ex-husband has been trying to get a meeting with the head of Apex Digital Ventures for 6 months, desperate for a new round of financing." He tapped the screen and a company logo appeared. "He's been pitching his stolen patent to them, offering a controlling stake in his new green energy division in exchange for a $500 million buy-in." I know about the patent," Alice said. "I found the original research. He stole it from an inventor in Austin." Damien's smile widened. It was a cold, sharp smile. "I know you did. And I know the inventor. He's my partner." He leaned forward, his green eyes locked on hers. "Alice, I am Apex Digital Ventures. Mark has been pitching his entire future to me." The revelation hung in the air, heavier than the silence in the lawyer's office. Alice stared at him, her mind struggling to connect the scholarship student who lived on ramen noodles with the man who commanded this flying fortress. "You're Apex," she finally managed. "But Forbes lists the CEO as a—" "Robert Harrison," Damien finished. A very good, very well-paid actor who enjoys being the public face of the company. I, on the other hand, prefer to remain private. The flight attendant appeared offering champagne. Alice noticed the bottle Dom Perignon marks Celebration Champagne. The sight of it made her stomach clench. "None for me, thank you," she said. "Just water." Damien nodded. "The same for me, Lydia. And the secure comms, please. We have a call in 20. Lydia nodded and disappeared. "You hate that champagne," Damien stated. It wasn't a question. "How do you know that?" "I've been keeping tabs, Alice. Not just on Mark. On you. I saw the pictures from the galas. You always had a glass of water." He leaned back, his expression softening. "I'm sorry. I know this is a lot. 12 years is a long time." "It is," she said, the shock finally ebbing, replaced by a wave of cold, sharp curiosity. "So you've been letting him pitch to you? You've been leading him on?" "Leading him on is an understatement," Damien said. "I've been draining his resources. I've had him commission 3 different multi-million-dollar feasibility studies, all for territories I have no intention of entering. I've had him fly his legal team to Zurich twice for meetings I unavoidably had to cancel at the last minute. Mark is bleeding cash trying to land this one whale that will save his company." "Save his company?" Alice asked. "I thought Faulkner Holdings was solid. He just won everything." Damien shook his head, pulling up a series of charts on his tablet. "He won a penthouse and a painting collection. He didn't win the company. The company is a house of cards. He's over-leveraged, exposed in the commercial real estate market, and the only thing he has of any real value is that stolen patent. He needs my money to bring it to market before the real inventor, my partner, files his." Alice's mind was flying faster than the jet. "So you're going to pull the funding?" "I'm not going to pull the funding, Alice," Damien said, his voice dropping. "I'm going to pull the rug out from under his entire world." But I was missing one piece, the piece that connects him directly to the theft. My partner can prove he invented it, but we couldn't prove Mark knew it was stolen. It would be a long, messy civil suit. "But I can," Alice whispered. "But you can," Damien confirmed. "You were there. You heard him. You as his wife were a privileged party. But as his ex-wife, you're just a witness." A slow, cold smile, one that mirrored Damien's, touched Alice's lips. He thought he was just getting rid of a wife. He had no idea he was creating his worst enemy. "That's why we had to wait," Damien said, "until that pen touched the paper, until the decree was final. As of—" He checked his watch, a complex, understated Patek Philippe. "58 minutes ago, you are no longer Alice Faulkner. You are Alice Tierney, and you have no marital privilege to protect him." Alice felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just freedom. It was power. "So what's in Paris?" "Paris," Damien said, "is where my legal team is waiting, and where Dr. Eris, the man you're about to make very wealthy, is waiting. We have a press conference scheduled for 9:00 a.m. tomorrow Paris time. We are going to announce the launch of his patent backed by Apex. And at the same time, we are filing a $500 million lawsuit against Mark Faulkner for industrial espionage and intellectual property theft." "He'll fight it," Alice said. "He'll bury you in paperwork." "He would," Damien agreed, "if he had any money left to pay his lawyers." Alice looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" Damien's smile faded, replaced by an intensity that was almost frightening. "Mark thinks I'm his only problem. He's wrong." He turned the tablet to face her. "He thinks he's just in a mild liquidity crunch. He doesn't know why. He thinks it's the market." He pulled up another file. It was a list of Shell Corporation's bond holdings and outstanding debts. "Alice, Mark hasn't just been pitching to me. He's been borrowing from me. You've been lending him money?" "No," Damien said. "I've been buying his debt. Every time he needed to float a bond, every time he needed a short-term loan to cover payroll, Because he'd overspent on his jet, my shell corpse bought that debt. He has no idea. He thinks his debt is held by a dozen different impersonal hedge funds. He zoomed in on one line item. As of this morning, I own 70% of Faulkner Holdings' unsecured debt. The moment we land, my team in Zurich has instructions to call in that debt. All of it. At once. Alice finally understood. He won't be able to pay. He won't even be able to make the interest payment, Damien said coldly. He's been using his liquid cash to pay for his sharks. He gestured, indicating the divorce lawyers. He's been trying to hide his assets from you, so he liquefied them, and in doing so, he made himself vulnerable. Alice looked out the window at the endless deep blue of the stratosphere. Mark thought he'd cast her out. He thought he'd won. But he'd only managed to trap himself. But, Damien. Why? Alice asked, her voice quiet. This is a spectacular biblical level of revenge. Why go to all this trouble for me? Damien was quiet for a long moment, watching the clouds far below. Because, Alice, in college you were the only person who ever believed in me. You co-signed the loan for my first server. You told me I wasn't crazy for thinking I could build what I built. He met her gaze. And because I've spent the last 12 years watching that parasite dim your light. Mark Faulkner didn't just steal a patent. He stole you. I'm just here to help you take yourself back. With interest. The secure phone on the table buzzed. Damien picked it up. It's time, he said to Alice. Are you ready to make a statement? Alice took a breath. She thought of the cold office, the gold pen, the splash of gutter water. Yes, she said. Put them on. While Alice and Damien were crossing the Atlantic, Mark Faulkner was celebrating. He was back in his penthouse, the one he had protected from Alice. He'd changed into a casual cashmere sweater and was pouring himself a glass of Macallan 25. His COO, a man named Robert, was sitting on the $100,000 sofa, grinning. I have to hand it to you, Mark, Robert said, accepting his own glass. Clean. Fast. She didn't even put up a fight. That new lawyer of yours is a butcher. You get what you pay for, Mark said, smirking. He swirled the amber liquid, admiring the view. She was a liability. All she did was spend money and ask stupid questions. Now we're lean. We're focused. As soon as this Apex deal closes, we'll be untouchable. Any word from Harrison? Robert asked. I got a text from his assistant while I was in the meeting. Mark said, pulling out his phone. He's deeply impressed with the final numbers. He's forwarding them to his board. He's just a puppet, but he's a useful one. The real money man behind Apex, whoever he is smart. He knows a winner. Mark raised his glass. To winning! To winning! Robert echoed. Mark's personal cell phone rang, the one he used for his brokers. He answered it, still smiling. David, tell me good news. The smile vanished. What do you mean, frozen? Mark demanded, his voice dropping an octave. What margin call? On what? Robert sat up, his drink forgotten. That's impossible, Mark snarled. That debt isn't due. Which creditor? Zurich Financial. I don't have anything with them. A consortium. What damn consortium? Put it on the screen, now. Mark stalked over to his home office setup, hitting a button. A large screen descended from the ceiling, lighting up with his portfolio. It was a sea of red. My God, Robert whispered, standing beside him. It's a coordinated call, Mark stammered, watching his liquidity evaporate in real time. They're all calling in the notes, all at once. This isn't a market fluctuation. This is an attack. His other line rang. It was his CFO. Don't tell me, Mark barked into the phone. Mark, we're finished. The CFO's voice was panicked. A creditor. AF Investments. Just called in the $500 million bridge loan. We have 24 hours to pay, or they take the collateral. The collateral, Mark said, his blood turning to ice. The company mark. The collateral is all of Faulkner Holdings. Mark's mind raced. AF Investments. I've never heard of them. Who are they? Find them. I'm trying. They're a ghost. A shell corp out of Delaware. Oh wait. Mark. The registration. The primary signatory. Oh no. Who is it, damn it? It's Tierney. The signatory is Alice Tierney. Mark dropped the phone. He stared at the screen at the name he had just moments ago dismissed. Alice. His stupid, pretty liability of a wife. He thought back. The inheritance he thought was just cash. The shopping trips she took. The nights she was at the museum for board meetings. It wasn't a setup. It was an ambush. She had been buying his debt. Before he could even process the betrayal, an alert flashed on the screen. A Bloomberg News flash. Breaking Apex Digital Ventures announces one Blober partnership with Dr. Eris Thorne for new Helios clean energy patent. Lawsuit filed against Faulkner Holdings for brazen intellectual property theft. The article featured a photo. A smiling Dr. Eris, and beside him walking into a press conference in Paris was Damien Knight, the burned-out tech nerd. And holding Damien's arm looking composed and powerful was Alice. Mark made a sound that was half choke, half scream. He was ruined. She hadn't just divorced him, she had liquidated him. The morning light in Paris was soft and golden, a stark contrast to the harsh, sterile world of Mark's boardroom. Alice stood on the balcony of her suite at the Hôtel de Crillon, a coffee in her hand. The Place de la Concorde spread out before her a vista of impossible beauty. She had spent the previous evening with Damien's legal team going over her notes, her timelines, and the damning voice memos she'd secretly recorded of Mark bragging about his theft. The lawyers had looked at her with a new profound respect. Damien had given her this suite, the sweet Marie Antoinette, and told her to order anything she wanted. She'd slept for 9 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep she hadn't known in a decade. There was a soft knock. "Come in," she called. Damien entered holding a tablet. He was wearing a casual linen shirt looking more like the college student she remembered. "Good morning," he said, his smile genuine. "Sleep well." "Like the dead," Alice replied, turning back to the view. Is it done?" "Faulkner Holdings is in receivership as of an hour ago," Damien said, joining her at the balcony. "The board has fired Mark. Your AF Investments, which by the way was brilliant, is now the primary creditor. You essentially own him, or what's left of him." "What is left of him?" "A penthouse in foreclosure, a jet that's about to be seized by my bank, and a reputation that is currently being dissected by every major news outlet on the planet." "Oh," he added, "and a preliminary injunction freezing all his personal assets. He can't even pay his lawyers to fight us." Alice closed her eyes, letting the full weight of her victory settle over her. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like justice. It felt like balance. "And Dr. Eris?" she asked. "He's a very happy man. We're having dinner tonight to celebrate. He wants to thank you personally. You didn't just give him his patent back. You gave him the justice he'd stopped believing in." Alice finally turned to Damien. "And what about you? You spent a fortune on this. You spent 18 months of your life on this." "I did," he said simply. "Why?" she asked again. "It wasn't just for me. It wasn't just for Dr. Eris. What did you get out of this, Damien?" Damien looked out at the city. "When I was building my company, I had a partner, my best friend. We were just like Mark and Dr. Eris. I was the ideas guy. He was the business guy. When we got our first big offer, he took it. He engineered a buyout that locked me out of my own company with my own code. He stole it all. I was left with nothing. It took me 3 years to start again to build Apex from scratch." He looked at her. "I hate thieves, Alice. I hate men who use power to crush people who trust them. Mark Faulkner, He was a personality type I understood very well. Taking him down wasn't just revenge for you. It was housekeeping. He offered her the tablet. "This is yours." She looked at the screen. It was a bank transfer notification. "What is this?" "It's $50 million. "That's your fee," Damien said. "As the primary partner in the recovery of the patent, that's your percentage. It's just the start. AF Investments is now a very real, very powerful holding company. The question is, what do you want to do with it?" Alice stared at the number. It was more than Mark had ever trusted her with. It was more than her original inheritance. It was hers. Earned. She looked at Damien, a spark in her eye he hadn't seen since they were 20. "I want to learn how to do what you do. I want to build things. And I want to find other people like Dr. Eris. I want to fund the people Mark Faulkners of the world overlook." Damien Knight grinned a full, bright, unguarded grin. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "I'm starting a new division at Apex. A venture capital fund focused on ethical tech and emerging markets. I need someone to run it. Someone with a mind for numbers, an eye for detail, and a spine of absolute steel." "You think I'm that person?" Alice asked. "I know you are," he replied. "You're the woman who just took down a New York tycoon with nothing but his own ego and a few secret notes. The job is yours if you want it. We can run it from here, or London, or New York, wherever you want." Alice looked back at the city. She was no longer an ex-wife. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't even just Alice Tierney. She was a queen, and this was her castle. "I'll take the job," she said, "on one condition. Anything. You stop calling me Ms. Tierney. It's Alice. And second, you have to take me to dinner. Somewhere he could never get a reservation." 6 months passed. The name Mark Faulkner became a cautionary tale whispered in the exclusive clubs and boardrooms of New York. He was a ghost. The SEC, spurred on by the evidence from the lawsuit, had launched its own investigation. Mark was facing criminal charges. He had, as Damien predicted, lost everything. The penthouse, the jet, the art. He was last seen living in a rented flat in New Jersey, his name a permanent stain. Alice, however, was a rising star. She had taken to her new role with the same silent, methodical intensity she had used to dismantle her husband's life. She didn't just run the ethical fund. She became its driving force. She had a talent for seeing the person behind the pitch, for spotting the brilliance that arrogance and bluster often missed. AF Knight Capital, as the press dubbed it, became one of the most successful new VCs in the world. Alice, with her quiet intelligence and a backstory the media couldn't get enough of, was its public face. She had traded her beige sheath dress for the sharp, elegant lines of Chanel and Acris. She commanded boardrooms not with a loud voice but with unassailable facts. She and Damien had become a formidable team. Their partnership was at first strictly professional. They traveled the world from Singapore to Berlin, vetting deals, building new companies. They worked late nights fueled by coffee and a shared driving passion. The romance, when it finally happened, was as quiet and inevitable as their ascent. It wasn't the fiery, possessive passion Mark had demanded. It was a slow burn built on mutual respect. It happened one night in a hotel bar in Tokyo, after they'd closed a deal that would revolutionize sustainable energy in Asia. They were talking about their college days, laughing. "You know," Damien said, looking at her over his glass, "I was terrified of you back then. You were the only one who could ever beat me in a head-to-head argument." "You weren't so bad yourself," Alice smiled. "You were just relentless." "I was," he agreed. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching her hand. "I still am." Their eyes met, and the 12 years of lost time, of pain and betrayal, simply dissolved. It wasn't a rescue, it was a reunion. They were on the G700 again, flying back to New York. Alice was reading a proposal, making notes in the margin. Damien was watching her, a look of profound admiration on his face. "What is it?" she asked, not looking up. "I was just thinking," he said. "Do you ever miss it? Any of it?" Alice put the proposal down. She thought of the cold penthouse, the patronizing dismissal, the suffocating weight of being Mrs. Faulkner. "I miss nothing," she said. "I'm not the person who lived that life anymore." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm asking." He opened a small platinum-lined drawer by his seat. He took out a small velvet box. It was not a large, gaudy ring. It was a simple, elegant band with a single, perfect, ethically sourced diamond. "Alice Tierney," he said, his voice completely serious. "You are the most brilliant, resilient, and fascinating person I have ever known. I am not asking you to be my wife. I am asking you to be my partner. In everything. For good." Alice looked at the ring, then at his face. This wasn't a man trying to own her. This was a man asking to stand beside her. She smiled. "Damien Knight, I thought you'd never ask." The air in Davos was thin and sharp-tasting of snow and old money. A year to the day after she had walked out of Mark's life, Alice Tierney stood backstage not in a beige sheath dress, but in a tailored Armani suit, the color of a winter sky. The fabric was a quiet armor, a physical representation of the woman she had become. She was no longer a ghost in someone else's life. She was the most anticipated keynote speaker of the World Economic Forum. She rolled her wrist, feeling the comforting solid weight of the Patek Philippe Damien had given her. It wasn't a gift of possession. It was a mark of partnership. "A watch for the woman who has taken back her time," he'd said. "You're nervous," a quiet voice said beside her. Damien Knight, looking infuriatingly relaxed in a dark turtleneck and blazer, handed her a bottle of water. He was, as far as the world was concerned, the reclusive titan behind Apex. But here in this small shadowed space he was just her partner. "I'm not nervous," Alice replied, taking a small sip. "I'm cataloging. There are 3 bankers from Credit Suisse in the front row who turned me down for a personal line of credit 2 years ago. The Minister of Finance for Germany is in seat 4B. He needs our green tech fund. And—" she smiled faintly. "Robert, my ex-husband's former COO, is in the 10th row. He's working for Bain Capital now. He looks like he hasn't slept in a week." Damien chuckled, a low, warm sound. "So not nervous, just preparing your lines of fire. That's my girl." He touched her elbow. "They're waiting for you, Alice. Go show them what an empire really looks like." A coordinator with a headset spoke her name. "Ms. Tierney in 5. Alice nodded. She looked at Damien. The love she felt for him was a different creature from the suffocating, desperate affection she'd had for Mark. This was a clean, bright, powerful thing forged in respect. "See you on the other side," she said. "I'll be the one clapping the loudest," he promised. She stepped from the darkness into a blinding wall of light. The auditorium was vast, a sea of the world's most powerful and influential people. A year ago these faces would have looked through her at a gala. Today they were silent, their attention fixed, laser-sharp on her. In the front row, Damien caught her eye and gave a small, encouraging nod. He was flanked by a Japanese tech billionaire and a French prime minister, both of whom he was politely ignoring in favor of watching her. Alice walked to the center of the stage, her heels clicking with a steady, confident rhythm. She stood at the lectern, but didn't grip it. She let her hands rest at her sides. She was not here to plead, to defend, or to prove. She was here to declare. "Good morning," she began. Her voice was clear and resonant, carrying across the silent hall. "My name is Alice Tierney, and I am the co-founder of AF Knight Capital." She paused, letting the name settle. The AF was a private joke. After Faulkner. "For most of my adult life," she continued, "I was taught to believe that power is something you take. That it is a zero-sum game. A victory for one must by necessity be a loss for another. For 10 years I lived in a world defined by that belief. I had a front-row seat to an empire built on that principle. An empire built on what could be taken, what could be stolen, and who could be diminished in the process." In the 10th row, Robert shifted in his seat, his face pale. I watched a man build a fortress of glass and steel around himself, believing that was strength. I watched him trade in assets in companies and in people, believing that acquisition was success. But a fortress, I learned, is not a symbol of power. It is a symbol of fear. And what you take can just as easily be taken from you. A ripple of understanding of nervous murmuring went through the crowd. They all knew her story. The Wall Street Journal had run a 6-page exposé titled, "The Quiet Coup: How Alice Tierney Walked Away with an Empire." That empire, Alice said, her voice dropping, is gone. It collapsed as all houses built on a rotten foundation must. It fell because it was hollow. It was built by a man so terrified of losing what he had, he never stopped to build anything of value. She moved from behind the lectern, walking closer to the edge of the stage, her presence holding every person captive. True power, she declared, is not something you take. It is something you build. It is not a fortress to protect yourself. It is a bridge to connect with others. When we founded AF Knight Capital, we did so on one simple guiding principle. We do not invest in killer apps. We invest in builders. We do not look for disruptors who wish to tear down. We find the creators, the visionaries, the quiet geniuses who want to add to the world, not just acquire pieces of it. She looked directly at the Credit Suisse bankers. We fund the people you overlook, the ones who don't have the right last name, the right connections, or the right aggressive bluster. We fund the Dr. Eris Thorns of the world, the brilliant minds betrayed by bullies left with nothing but their own genius. Our Helios Energy project, built from his stolen patent, is now on track to power 2 million homes by next year. That, gentlemen, that is power. That is an empire. My former life, she concluded, her voice softening but losing none of its steel, ended in a sterile boardroom on Park Avenue. It ended with a gold pen and a patronizing smile. I walked out of that room with nothing but my name. But it turned out, she smiled a true brilliant smile that lit up the stage, that was the only thing I ever needed. For a full 5 seconds there was absolute silence. Then the auditorium erupted. It wasn't polite applause. It was a thunderous standing ovation. A roar of approval. Damien was on his feet, his hands clapping loud and steady, his eyes filled with a pride that was so profound, Alice felt it across the room. The reception afterward was a crush of bodies. Alice was immediately surrounded, a vortex of Chanel suits and military-grade handshakes. Ms. Tierney, a marvelous speech, truly. The German finance minister kissed her hand. We must discuss your fund's investment in our Berlin solar grid. Robert, how unexpected. Alice turned. It was Robert Marks, old COO, his face a mask of nervous sweat. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne, offering one to her. Alice, he said, his voice overly familiar. Incredible. Just incredible. I always knew you had it in you. Alice looked at the offered glass, then at his face. This was the man who had sat on her sofa celebrating with Mark, calling her a liability. Did you? She asked, her voice quiet and cool. I don't recall that. Ah, well, you know how things were. He stammered, his bravado fading. Mark, he was a difficult man to work for. You know that better than anyone. Listen, I'm at Bain now. We're looking for new partners, and what you're doing with AFK, it's the future. I'd love to, build a bridge, as you said. He was quoting her speech. The audacity of it was almost impressive. Alice didn't take the glass. Robert, she said, her voice so soft he had to lean in. The last time I saw you, you were toasting my financial ruin. You were an accessory to a man who tried to destroy me. The bridge you want to build is, I suspect, just a lifeline for your own career. My answer is no, and if you ever quote me to my face again, you'll find my legal team is just as talented as my investment team. Robert's face went from pale to ashen. He set the champagne glass down on a passing tray, his hand shaking. I see. Excuse me. He all but ran, disappearing into the crowd. A moment later, a new voice cut through. "Alice, Alice Faulkner. My God, is that you?" Alice turned her composure flawless. It was a woman named Genevieve, the wife of one of Mark's former board members. Genevieve had been the queen bee of their old social circle, the one who had personally led the campaign to shun Alice, the one who had accidentally uninvited her from the charity board. She was dressed in a gaudy sequined gown that looked desperate in the bright afternoon light. She rushed forward, grabbing Alice's hands. "Darling, I just heard your speech. Chills. We've all been reading about you. It's just... wow, you look like a different person." "I'm a different person, Genevieve," Alice said, gently retrieving her hands. "Oh, of course you must be. Listen, darling, it was just awful what Mark did. Truly awful. We all said so. We had no idea." "You had no idea?" Alice asked, her voice neutral. "None. We were just... well, you know, Mark had everyone fooled. But you landed on your feet, didn't you? Right on top of the world." Genevieve leaned in, her smile becoming conspiratorial. "Listen, my nephew has this tiny little startup. A new app for rating dog walkers. It's very clever. And I thought, who better than Alice? Maybe you and Mr. Knight could just hear his pitch. For old time's sake." "For old time's sake," Alice repeated. She looked at this woman, at the desperate, sycophantic smile, and felt nothing. No anger, no bitterness, just distance. It was like looking at a creature in a zoo. "Genevieve," Alice said, "the last time we spoke you told me I was no longer a fit for the Children's Literacy Fund. You were right. I wasn't, and your nephew is not a fit for mine. I have to go." She turned, leaving Genevieve with her mouth open, and walked straight to Damien, who was waiting by the door. He held out his arm. "Had enough of your adoring public." "And my former fan club," Alice said, taking his arm. "Let's go home." Home was a sprawling glass and timber chalet perched on the side of a mountain with a view that looked like it had been stolen from a postcard. The G700, their original chariot, had brought them, and it waited at the private airfield below. They were in the chalet's main room, a fire roaring in a massive stone hearth. The snow was falling heavily now, cocooning them in a world of white and silence. Alice had changed into a soft cashmere sweater, and she was curled on the sofa, her head in Damien's lap. He was running his fingers through her hair, and they were both silent for a long, peaceful time, simply decompressing. "They were terrified of you," Damien said finally. "They weren't terrified of me," Alice murmured. "They were terrified of my power. There's a difference." "Is there?" he asked. "You wield it well." "I learned from the best." She smiled, looking up at him. "Both the worst and the best." Damien's secure phone buzzed on the table. He rarely looked at it after 8 p.m., but he'd been waiting for this. He picked it up, his expression hardening as he read. "It's from our legal team in New York," he said. Alice sat up, instantly alert. "What is it?" "It's about Mark." Alice felt a familiar cold clench in her stomach, but it was distant now. "Is he appealing the SEC ruling?" "No, he can't. He's penniless." Damien said, a note of finality in his voice. "He was released from the minimum security facility in Otisville 2 days ago. Good behavior. He's been busy." "Busy how?" Damien handed her the phone. It was a forwarded email chain. The original email was from Mark. It wasn't sent to Dr. Eris or to Alice or to anyone in power. It was sent to a general careers Helios.com inbox. It was a job application. Alice read it, her eyes scanning the pathetic, rambling text. Mark was applying for a mid-level analyst position in strategy. He'd attached his old pre-scandal resume. He'd written a full groveling cover letter praising the visionary work of Helios Energy. He wrote about his long-standing passion for the green energy sector and his unique insights into the market. He was in effect applying to work for the company built on the patent he'd stolen from the man he'd tried to ruin. "My God," Alice whispered. The desperation. He actually thinks he can get back in. He thinks he can just start over inside our world. It's the only world he knows, Damien said grimly. He's a parasite. He's looking for a new host. The email chain continued. The low-level HR manager had correctly flagged the name and sent it to security. Security had sent it to legal. Legal had sent it to Dr. Eris. And Dr. Eris had replied. Alice scrolled down to the final message. It was a formal, curt response from Dr. Eris's personal email, but it was CC'd to the entire legal department of AF Knight Capital. Subject RE application, strategic analyst, Mark Faulkner. Mr. Faulkner, your application is rejected. Furthermore, this email serves as a formal notice to cease and desist any and all contact with Helios Energy, its subsidiaries, its executives, and any company affiliated with AF Knight Capital in perpetuity. A violation of this request will be met with immediate legal action for harassment. No further correspondence will be acknowledged. Dr. Eris Thorne. It wasn't just a no. It was a legal execution. It was the final door in the world being slammed, bolted, and barricaded in his face. He was not just an outcast. He was a liability, a name on a legal document to be actively avoided. Alice handed the phone back to Damien. She stood up and walked to the massive window looking out at the falling snow. She thought of Mark standing in the boardroom, his victor's smirk. She thought of him in a rented flat or a halfway house reading that email. She felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, no anger. The space he had occupied in her head, the vast, dark territory of her anger and her plots for revenge, was just empty, and in its place the quiet, warm hum of her own life. "It's over," she said, her voice quiet. "It's really finally over." Damien came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Yes," he said, "it is." They stood there for a long time, watching the snow bury the world, making it clean and new. "So, Ms. Tierney," Damien murmured into her ear, "you just conquered Davos. You've officially put your ghost to rest. What do you want to do tomorrow?" Alice leaned back against his chest, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. "I think," she said, "it's time we took a vacation. A real one. No phones, no keynotes." "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "The G800 is fueled and waiting." "The G800? What happened to the 700? "I upgraded," Damien said. "I also bought a little something." "Damien, what did you buy?" she asked, already half laughing. "A small island, off the coast of New Zealand. It's got a research station. I was thinking, AF Knight Capital's next big project could be in sustainable aquaculture, and it has a very nice, very private beach." Alice turned in his arms to face him. She looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had respected her when she was dismissed, and who had partnered with her to build a new world. "Damien Knight," she said, "that is the best idea you've ever had." "I have my moments," he smiled. "Just one thing," Alice said, tracing the line of his jaw. "On this vacation, I get the window seat." He laughed, a full, genuine sound that filled the warm room. "Anything you want, Alice. Anything in the world." He kissed her, not with the fire of a new romance, but with the deep, abiding certainty of a forever partnership. Outside the snow fell, and inside the new empire built, not on theft, but on brilliance, was quiet and safe, and just beginning. The journey from a silent signature to a seat of power shows that the end of one chapter is often the explosive beginning of another. Alice's story is one of quiet strength, hidden intelligence, and the powerful justice that comes when you're underestimated. What was your favorite twist? Did you suspect Alice's secret plan? Or were you as shocked as Mark when the tables turned? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one, and your ideas often inspire our next story. If you love this story of revenge and rebirth, please hit that like button, as it truly helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and ring the bell. We have so many more stories of drama, romance, and incredible twists coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for your support. We'll see you in the next story.